In 3, 2, 1. All right, sweet. Okay. So then let me present my screen to show you the summary of your commentary on last week's discussion question. It's coming up. It's coming up. So can y'all see it? Yes? Once again, great job tackling the discussion question. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you all show in responding to this. I think one of the most important things that I've tried to do with these discussion questions, hopefully mostly successfully, is to get you thinking about some personal experience you have that relates to the topics. The whole point of that is to try and cement this stuff in your heads, right? So that as you go forward and you're in other situations where the text or class material is relevant, you think, oh yeah, that's right. This is something that I do know about, that I have studied in more depth, so I can understand it differently and better. You've all been part of teams, lots of different teams. So you have some expertise in this, at least from your perspective thus far. Now, I want to give you a bit of a heads up about your future. As you go forward in organizations, you know, when you're first working in an organization as a frontline staff person, you will have some sense of how the organization overall works. And then as you become a first level manager, whatever the title is, that's the role where you're overseeing frontline staff. You'll move into middle management. Middle management, the job is very different. The leadership job is very different from the job of a first level manager, okay? And then also, if you make it to the C-suite, if that's part of your aspiration, if you make it to that top, again, the leadership role changes significantly. That certainly relates to the kinds of decisions that people make at those different roles, but also the kind of leadership that they need to exert. What you have all experienced so far, for the most part, you've been a member of teams as either a frontline staff person, or many of you also talked about athletic teams where you were one of the athletes, etc. So you haven't yet necessarily, for the most part, been in the leadership position. You called out communication as more people called out communication than any other factor that you thought made a difference in terms of team effectiveness. As you look at what I have here, and I'll share this with you as a nice summary, I want you to think about how you communicate with people and what makes for really effective communication. In some situations, it's high touch, right? It's lots of interpersonal, one-on-one, and then it's also the overall team. Sometimes, though, you can't do that, like right now, for example. We are a virtual team, if you will, and we haven't, for the most part, I have not met you in person. There are a couple of you that I have, but most of you I have not. And so we don't have the kind of relationship that we might typically have face to face. So we have to communicate differently, right? So for example, as I'm writing emails to you, I'm trying to be, not always successfully, I recognize, but I'm trying to be as succinct as possible, because I recognize one of the problems with that medium is that people stop reading after so many lines. Even though I might have more to say, I just sort of cut it short. I write up the class agendas using the 1, 2, 3, 4, because I think it's easier to see exactly how we're proceeding. Are you with me? But if we were meeting face to face, I would probably do things quite differently. So I want you to just think about communication and what makes for effective communication. I loved that you pulled out leadership. And what I want to suggest here is you, all of you, I'm looking at your wonderful faces for the most part. You have to think of yourselves as leaders. You're going to be the leaders if you're not already. Some of you are already in leadership roles. What will that mean? What can you take away from this class and from your other experiences that will help you to be more effective in that role? Think about, as you review what you and your colleagues said about this, the importance, for example, of creating the conditions under which the team chooses to be motivated. Remember, you don't motivate other people. That's not how that works. You create the conditions under which they hopefully choose to be motivated. How are you going to do that? To what extent are you going to be able to balance relations-oriented behaviors with task-oriented behaviors? One of the biggest mistakes that early leaders make, so pay attention to this because you all are going to be walking into this, is you get too focused on the task and you forget about building relationships. You think it's all about getting things done, and it is important to get things done, but it's also critical to build relationships. Otherwise, people can't trust you. And if people don't trust you, they will not do difficult things for you. It's not hard to ask people to do easy things. That's not leadership. Leadership isn't getting people to do the easy stuff. Leadership is getting people to do the hard stuff. And that requires trust, which requires relationship building. So again, this class and what you've learned in it should be super helpful to you. I also liked that several of you pulled out this idea of what one person called actual teamwork. And then other people talked about team bonding, and other people talked about team chemistry. And one of the things that we know about how to build chemistry is to have people spend time together. Whether it's working on the task itself, whether it's out of the workplace, whatever, people have to spend time together in order to develop that chemistry. Is everybody with me on this? So again, in your leadership role, part of what you need to think about is, how do I make sure that the people who are working together in this team are, in fact, getting the time they need that isn't just on task, to feel comfortable with each other, to have exchanged stories about, their lives growing up or whatever, in order to achieve that chemistry. Then commitment to the team and its goals. Having people all on the same page is so important, right? Getting people to agree. One of the ways that you achieve this as a leader is talking to people about what those goals might be. We know that when people are involved in the conversation to set goals, they are more likely to be committed to those goals. When someone else just tells them what the goal is, unless it just happens to align with their personal interests, you're not going to get the same kind of commitment. Clear roles so people know exactly what they're supposed to do, a vision, that overall purpose, and then, of course, trust. So I thought you did a bang-up job talking about this. I think this page with these, and again, I did basically a content analysis. The size of the words tells you how often something appeared in all of your writing. You keep this handy. This is going to be incredibly helpful to you as a leader going forward. So well done. Way to go, folks. I'm going to stop presenting. All right. So let's talk about this week's discussion question. And I didn't have you do it online, partly because I think it's good for us to have this conversation right now. Also to, cut you a little slack, one less thing to do on the final week when you're doing other things, right? Hopefully this is helpful to you. But let's go ahead and talk about, that difficult decision, one of the more difficult decisions that you've had to make. And I want to hear from everybody. So this is not just like we would do if we were doing the online discussion. I want everyone to chime in and talk a little bit about that difficult decision that you've had to make. Also, just as you saw in the discussion question online, what made it difficult? Why was it hard to make? And then, were you happy with your decision after you made it? So who would like to go first? I can call on people, but I like to. Joe, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll start.
Go for it.
First of all, I think thinking about this made me realize that I haven't really had to make like too many difficult decisions in my life. So that was
Fair.
one thing that I realized. But I'd say the most difficult was just choosing which college to attend, because I came in for soccer and I had like some lower level teams that like really were recruiting me hard, and then some like schools that I actually really wanted to go to that I had to like kind of fight for.
Okay.
So, and it made the decision so difficult because of how important it is of like a decision, like what school you're going to go to. That's 4 years of your life. So, and you're paying so much money and getting so much like out of it. So But I'd say overall, I'm pretty happy with it because I love St.
Okay.
Norbert and all the people that I've met. So
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Joe. Who wants to go next? And by the way, it's very possible, folks, that the decision that was one of your most difficult, it was also somebody else's most difficult. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly acceptable to repeat things or not. Okay. So who wants to go next? Be brave.
I'll go.
Okay.
Mine was kind of like the same as his, but mine wasn't what college is, if I was going to go to college or not go to college. Because I could have worked for my dad and not gone to college and just like made 15 an hour and done that. But I decided to go to college because, one, I really didn't want to give up baseball yet. And two, I thought it would just be better if I had at least a degree. And then if I still didn't get a job out of college, I could work for my dad. And then I'd have that as a backup plan too. So I decided I would go to college, and it worked out.
So you're happy with your decision?
Yeah.
Cool. Very good. Thank you, Nick. Who wants to go next?
I guess I can go. Mine's
Okay.
kind of piggybacking on the other two. It again was like where I wanted to go to college, mostly determined from like a financial standpoint.
Sure.
So what college that I like the best and versus really what I could afford. And so in the end, came down to looking at what college offered the most while being like the most affordable. And that was definitely a tough decision to make.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think you made the right decision?
Yeah, I've been super happy at St. Norbert's.
Okay, good, good. I mean, folks, we aren't always happy with the outcomes of our decisions, right? We aren't always. This is to be expected. Thank you, Max, for sharing that. Who wants to go next? Like I said, I want to hear from everybody, so be brave.
I can go, or Claire, you can go.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I originally was going to go with the college decision as well, but for the sake of changing up the conversation, I can talk about study abroad.
Okay.
So that was a big decision because, of course, you're traveling internationally to a place you've maybe never been, to a culture you've maybe never experienced. So that was a big decision. I ended up going to Italy, which was really scary for me because I don't know Italian and I've never been to Italy before. But I was really happy with kind of taking that leap. And I knew enough Spanish, and Spanish is pretty close to Italian, that I could kind of make my way through for the most part.
So you were happy with your decision?
Yep. Yeah, very happy.
Cool. Thank you, Claire. Annika, did you want to go since you were?
Yeah, so mine is all about college as well, college decision. My top two were St. Norbert and Madison, which have two really different atmospheres. So like, I guess I was kind of like gonna just go with my decision on the day that I was choosing if I was feeling like more introverted or more extroverted, I guess.
Okay.
Hard to make the decision because both my parents went to Madison and my older brother went to Madison. So I kind of was like, oh, I should follow along and be a Badger as well. But I don't know, I guess like in all, I felt like St. Norbert was probably my better option just for me. And I was happy with the decision, but like, I don't know, still this first semester in college, I was like, oh, I should, like, what would have happened if I would have gone to Madison? Like, I was still like questioning it.
Sure. Perfectly legit. Thank you, Annika. Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay, Mason.
One of the most difficult was probably deciding whether I wanted to play football in high school or just focus on baseball and basketball. And I chose to not play football. Our team was really bad, and I didn't want to just get, because I was a quarterback, so I would have got lit up every play. But now, looking back at it, I kind of wish I would have played because one of my roommates, Matt, he always tells me about how much fun he had when he played football in high school. And I kind of wish I did too.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that, Mason.
I can go.
Oh, competition. How exciting. Somebody just.
Patrick, you can go.
Okay.
Thanks. One of mine, it seems kind of weird, but it's 2 years ago, I bought a go-kart. And it was difficult mainly because everyone that I knew that knew about it was telling me no, because it was like, where are you going to drive it? You don't have that sort of income to support a hobby right now. You know, it's too loud, all this kind of stuff. And I ended up getting it, and it ended up being great. So I've learned to be more adventurous in terms of what I do. But it's kind of a small thing, but it just impacts me a lot.
Hey.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, Patrick. Sam, did you want to go?
Yeah, mine was more about transferring after this year. I know I applied to a bunch of schools and I got in, and I just decided that I'm going to come back to St. Norbert next year. And I think there was a lot. Yeah, I know. I think there was a lot of there was a lot going for transferring, but I think I made some great friends this year that I feel like I'd be leaving. So
okay,
I think that definitely helped swing St. Norbert.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jake.
I'll go quick.
Okay.
Although it sounds like a broken record, because I think actually a lot of us are at the same point. This has to do with us being at the same point in our lives.
Absolutely.
Where there's not really that many massive decisions, like in a leadership role in which we're talking about, that we have to really deal with as much. But yeah, mine would be college too. Basically touching on the points people have before me. I mean, it's 4 years of your life, like it's something to really take seriously. And at this point in my life, that decision was above any other decision given that impact. Mm-hmm. So I am happy with my decision. I love Norbs, and yeah, that has to be the so far the biggest impact. I think there's going to be a lot of bigger decisions coming up in my life as we all mature and get to that age of which everything's bigger, income, everything, families, stuff like that. So
sure.
But so far, yeah, that.
Okay. That makes sense, right, folks? I mean, I think for many of you, the college choice is to date perhaps one of the most difficult that you've made. Again, I still want to hear everybody, because even though you might be thinking to yourself, oh man, somebody else has already given mine, you each have your own bit of nuance. So, and as people continue to talk, if they do share similar examples, listen for the nuance, listen for the difference, okay? And don't worry about whether you're able to express yours differently than somebody else. Just say what you're thinking. Just describe your experience. That's all that matters. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
So mine's really similar to Claire as well. I studied abroad this past fall semester, and it was a difficult decision for me, especially financially, just because it's a lot of money because you go over there and travel a lot. I studied abroad in Ireland. But I also was contemplating to study abroad this spring just because I loved all the activities going on and stuff. So I'm obviously super happy that I chose to go abroad this past fall instead of spring. Now, just knowing now that I would have had to come home early and stuff, and that would have been super devastating.
Yeah, a big drag for people who were abroad and then had to come back early, right? On a positive note, once you've been abroad, it's a lot easier to go abroad again. And I think most people, once they've put that passport to use, they can't wait to do it again. So, I mean, ultimately, you got out, you went, and life is good. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
So I decided between what major I wanted to take, either business or biology, because for a long time I wanted to be a vet. And then my senior year of high school, I decided that I really didn't want to have to go through 8 more years of school. So I switched my major, and I think business is probably the right decision.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go.
Oh, wait.
I did a study abroad as well, and it's kind of tough getting up and leaving the family for 5 months to go to a place you've never been before, especially if you don't go with anybody like I did. It was quite the experience, and I highly recommend it if you got time left still.
Yeah, where did you go?
I went to Sydney, Australia.
It's not a terrible place, right?
Not at all.
Realistically, study abroad, they're never terrible places. They're always great.
Oh
There's
yeah.
always something fantastic, right?
Right.
Thank you for sharing, Kyle. Who's next? Be brave.
I could go.
Okay, great.
So mine was deciding which college to go to. And I was looking at a really similar college, like 6 hours away, and then St. Norbert, which is like half an hour from my house. So it was all about deciding like if I wanted to be able to come home on the weekends or not. And I obviously just decided to be closer to home, which I do think that was the right move for me because I'm very family oriented.
Okay.
So I think I would have missed my family so much. And so
Gotcha.
like obviously I'm glad I made my decision.
Cool. Very good. Thank you, Chloe. Who's next?
I can go.
Okay.
I was in a pretty similar boat with Chloe, deciding whether or not I wanted to go to St. Norbert or school farther away because my family lives in Green Bay. And just after talking with one of my coaches who works at St. Norbert, he basically just told me that if you go to St. Norbert, it's nice because you can stay at school and then it's like you're far away. But then if you ever need anything, you're right next to your parents and your family, so you can get it right away. And that kind of influenced my decision to come to St. Norbert. I think I made the right decision.
Cool. Thank you, Evan. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay. Go for it, Bryce.
My toughest decision was also where to go to college. Like coming out of high school, I didn't really know what to major in and stuff.
Yeah.
I was deciding between like engineering and like business or something. So my other school is like an engineering school, but I fell in love with the campus, so I decided to come here.
Mm-hmm. And was it a good decision?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Great. Great. Who's next? Okay.
I can go. So my toughest decision was deciding what to major in because I had no clue what I wanted to do until around my sophomore year. But I decided on global business and I'm pretty happy with it.
Okay. Yeah, I know all about your decision making because I'm Clay's advisor, So poor Clay's been stuck with me, I think, from the beginning, right? Yeah. Poor Clay. All right. Poor Clay. All right. Who's going next? Be brave. Lindsay.
I'll go. Mine was also what to study in college because I'm kind of still deciding, I guess, because I'm not really sure what I want to do after.
Sure.
But it's between like political science and business, which are pretty different too. So, I don't know. I think right now I'm majoring in political science and minoring in business, and I think that was a good decision because it kind of offers me some flexibility too. Since I'm only a freshman, I can kind of change, like if I need to, I can still major in business, and so I think it was a good decision.
Cool. Very good. Thank you. All right. Who's next? Be brave. Or I can call on you.
I can go.
Okay.
So last year during, I think it was winter break, my sister and my friend had decided they wanted to go to London, and this was like a quick decision, like they were going to leave in a week. And I was deciding whether I was going to go or not because as a college student, we obviously don't have much money. So I ended up going, and it definitely was worth it. So it was really fun.
What did you like about it? What made it worth it?
There's a lot, like it's so different compared to cities in the US because it's a low rise and it's really historical, which is really different from skyscrapers and stuff we have here. Has some of that, but it's majority of the city is a low rise city, which is really cool.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Lexi. Who's next? Who's next? Be bold.
I'll go next.
Okay.
So mine was kind of like the first one, just because I wanted to play hockey, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go, and I didn't want to go far. So St. Norbert was kind of perfect for that reason.
Okay. And was it a good decision?
Yeah, I really like it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Lauren. Next.
I can go.
Okay, great, Deanna.
So mine was kind of my decision to change my career path. I'm not a business major. I've been a sociology major for around since I started college. And it's my junior year, and I kind of just decided that I'm interested in HR. So this has been my first semester taking business classes. And I've come to realize that I really like it and it kind of fits. So, yeah.
Good. Cool. Excellent. All right. Next. Next.
I can go next.
Thank you, Sam.
I guess like one of the hardest decisions I had to make was I decided to become like a volunteer firefighter, and I don't know, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it's a lot of fun. Like I love doing it, and I don't know, I just love doing it.
Okay, so it was a good decision.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. Thank you. All right. I know who hasn't shared yet, so you may as well volunteer.
Okay, I guess I'll go next.
Thank you, Connor.
One of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make is when my German professor asked me to be co-president with another person of German club. And that was probably the hardest for me because it required a lot of accountability and leadership, especially to be one of the presidents of the club. And I'm personally a very introverted person. So it was kind of hard for me to step up and take a leap of faith into a position that required to be around a lot of other people and engage with them. And I've never had to make one of those decisions before. And in the end, I chose to accept it. And even though it fell through in the end, I was very happy that I made the decision to go through with it.
Good. Good. Thank you, Connor. Who's next? You can't hide from me. Okay, Dave. Or Gerardo, go for it.
Oh, okay. So, up until this point, like I feel like most of my decisions have been made by my parents, and one that hasn't, like most of us, has been where to go to college. And I just decided on St. Norbert because it was close to home, so I could go back home really easily, and that's why mostly I decided to go here.
Okay. And did it turn out, is it a good decision?
Yeah, I think it was a good decision. It's really nice being able to go home real quick and just like get stuff, or a lot of times I forget stuff when I move in or move out for like a break, and then I can just come back really easily.
Fair point. Fair point. Who's next? Dave, you want to go?
Oh, why not?
The enthusiasm.
I don't know if this would technically be a difficult decision, but this is more like an important decision, I guess.
Okay.
I've been all around the block after high school. I'm 6 years out of high school now, and I guess what got me to St. Norbert was, I think, the most monumental decision, for lack of a better word, which, I mean, at times it might have been. I think the path that got me to that is difficult. So many colleges I'd been to previously, just through various circumstances, just never quite worked out exactly how I thought. And I got to the point where I'm like, okay, being from the Green Bay area originally, it's like, okay, I've tried like everything. What else can I do? And that's reasonable. And I'm like, I'll give St. Norbert a try. Honestly, did not think I'd get in, considering all the places I'd been in my average to below average grades. And somehow I got accepted, and it's worked out way better than I even could have imagined. And so I think just a combination of factors led me to make a decision to give this place a try. And sure glad I did, because
Good.
I'm in a much better spot now than I was even 2 years ago. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, there's always, well, I'm going to come back to some of the things in common that your decisions share. Let's see here. We haven't heard yet from Joe, not Joe Corno, but Joe
Yeah, I'll go.
Pasquale. Go for it.
I guess my toughest decision so far could be also college, and just in terms of how far I want to go away from home. And I live in the Chicago area, so Green Bay is it's not too far, but it's far enough.
Mhm.
And it's either between here and then a school in Minnesota. And then I just figured Minnesota is a little bit too far, so I think I made the right decision.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Let's see, who do I have left? Sam Schmitz. What do you got for us?
I think at least recently, one of the bigger decisions I've had to make is where I'm going to be working this summer, because obviously with the situation that we're facing right now, there's not a lot of places that are hiring. Luckily, I mean, my friend's dad owns a business, so he's hiring, but the place that I've worked for the last 3 summers let me know that they're not going to be hiring anymore. So that was kind of a difficult thing to happen. So I guess that's a pretty big decision, figuring out somewhere where I can work and want to work at the same time.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And do you think you have made the right decision?
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah. Still to be determined, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I believe everyone has chimed in. I think. I'm pretty sure. These are some of the things that I heard as you were talking. Part of what makes those decisions difficult is the consequences associated with making those decisions. They're big consequences. They're important consequences. A second thing that I heard you saying that made these more challenging was the uncertainty involved. The fact that you didn't know for sure how things would turn out, and yet you had to make a leap anyway. I heard that across the board. The challenges of trying to weigh different criteria, things like, do I want to be closer to home? Do I want to be further away from home? What will it be like to go to some place that I've never been before? Is that something that is important to me to sort of push myself out of my comfort zone or not? I also heard some of you talking about other people's influence, or not necessarily always direct, but even sometimes indirectly. For example, Annika talking about, parents and a sibling having gone to another institution and how that might have weighed in the thinking, right? What you've described, of course, are factors that are associated with all difficult decisions. Now, Sam made the point that most of you have, because of, frankly, your age, you have experienced similar kinds of difficult decisions, not all exactly the same, of course. And we should never assume that, because we have one thing in common, that means we have everything in common. That's a mistake, right? Not everyone is coming, for example, from the same socioeconomic background. Some people do have siblings, some don't. Some people's parents are together, some are not. I mean, there are all kinds of things that even at this point, up to this point in your life, may have influenced the kinds of decisions you've had to make. So we should recognize that. Being older than you by a few years, have had to make lots of difficult decisions, and it's my experience that no matter the content of the decision, the same kinds of things come into play. For example, thinking about consequences, trying to imagine how the decision might ultimately play out. Thinking about trying to manage the uncertainty. See, if there's no uncertainty, the decision is simple. You simply go with which one hits on most of the criteria the best. it becomes challenging, difficult when there is uncertainty about the consequences, uncertainty about whether we've identified the right criteria to be thinking about. Uncertainty causes us to experience a high degree of stress. It's one of the most stressful things. It's why this pandemic is making people actually crazy. It's the uncertainty of it all more than anything. It doesn't matter what people tell you when they try to articulate why they're tired, for example, of quarantine. More than anything, that which is causing people the most stress right now is uncertainty. Okay. So I'll pick one of my difficult decisions. I've had to make lots. But I'll pick one that relates somewhat to what you've described. And it was where I should go to get my PhD. And I'm going to pick that one because it touches on some of the things that you all mentioned in your difficult decisions, but it also extends it a little bit. So quick bio. Is everybody with me so far? Are we hanging in there? Do we need to do a stretch before I tell you this story? Can you? No? Just go for it. Just do it, Lucy. Okay. Did you all have chocolate for breakfast? I'd like to recommend that for the future. Okay. Chocolate is a great choice for breakfast. If it's good enough for later, it's good enough for early. Okay. All right. Anyway, so here's the story. And I have to go back a little bit in time for you to understand why this was such a difficult decision. So I am a high school dropout. All right. I do not have a regular high school diploma. I have a high school equivalency diploma. So I took a test. The reason I didn't finish high school has to do with my parents getting divorced when I was 16, which up to that point in my life, the day they got divorced was the greatest day of my life. My parents were a nightmare couple. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Caused me to experience a highly toxic childhood. I dropped out of high school. I was an A student, but there was so much going on in my life that focusing on high school was just not one of my priorities. So I stopped out. Later, I was dating someone who was going to college in a town other than where I was living. And for a variety of reasons, I decided I wanted to be in the same place, which meant I had to have at least a high school equivalency diploma because one cannot get into college without having finished high school. How rude, right? Okay. So I decided, fine, I'll do this. And I figured out what I had to do to take, at the time, all one needed to do was take a test. All right, fine. I had about 2.5 years of high school is what I had, what I finished before I dropped out. And so I, on a Friday, just made the decision, I'm going to do this. Monday, I was taking the test, passed the test with flying colors. And I had my high school equivalency diploma. Sweet. So then I could apply to go to college, which I did. Great. While I was in college, a variety of things came together. I did very well as an undergraduate. I graduated with highest honors. I was involved in all kinds of things. Blah, blah, blah. You don't care. Anyway. Somewhere along the line, I decided that I had to get out of Wisconsin. So I'm originally from Northeast Wisconsin. This is my hometown area. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't like living in Wisconsin because I hate winter. Okay? I hate it. I don't just dislike it. I loathe winter. And for those of you who love it, God bless you. But I can't stand the cold. It isn't the snow that bothers me. It's the cold. So I wanted to leave. And I had decided that what I was going to do was I was going to go to California. I had never been to California, by the way. I was in college. I was 20 the first time I got on a plane. And I got on that plane to go to Mexico for 6 weeks, which was a great decision. That's a different conversation, though. I was going to go to California and get my PhD. I was going to go right from my bachelor's to my PhD. That was my plan. Pretty good plan, right? So I thought. And then I met my husband. Ugh. And this is where things changed. And then we got married, and I had our first son. And this was shortly after I had finished my undergraduate. He was still a student when all of this happened. So I essentially had to postpone my plans. He is also from Northeast Wisconsin, and both of us have large extended families. I'm the oldest of 7. He's the oldest of 5. So we decided that we would hang out in Wisconsin for what I still at that point hoped would be a relatively short time. I still wanted to get my PhD because I wanted to be a professor. And trying to be a professor without a PhD is not a straightforward thing. Eventually, I had 3 sons, and I still wanted to get my PhD. So I was 32 years old. So I took the GMAT, which is the Graduate Management Admissions Test. It's required to get into PhD programs in business. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to see how I can do on this test. So I studied for this test for like 6 weeks. I had been out of school at that point for quite a while. I did so well on the test. My score placed me in the top 2% in the world. Is it because I'm such a genius? Ooh, wouldn't that be cool, huh? No, it's because I'm an excellent reader. And you know why I'm an excellent reader? Because I do it a lot. That's the secret if you want to do great on standardized tests. You just have to read a lot, okay? Anyway, top 2%. Here's what happens when you score in the top 2%. Everybody wants you. Everybody wants you. I had letters from schools. You couldn't believe it. Hello. I had letters like crazy, and they all wanted me to come there. Okay. So I applied to the University of Michigan, which was the top school in the country at the time for my field. I applied to Northwestern, also in the top 5. I applied to Indiana, another great one. Anyway, I had to be interviewed at the University of Michigan. I went with, there were 5 of us total for a weekend interview, a group interview, and I was one of the 2 people selected to be admitted to the University of Michigan, the top program in the country, in the world, actually, in my field. Wow, holy shit, right? Sorry. Whoops. Not only was I admitted, it was going to be a free ride. They were going to pay all of my tuition. They were going to provide my family with health insurance, with a living stipend. I was going to have a research assistantship. So this was going to be okay. Is everybody tracking with me so far? I had the same offer from Northwestern. They offered me a free ride. Holy mackerel. This sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? So I decided that I would go to the University of Michigan. If you've never been there, it's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. The school, again, the University of Michigan, has one of the finest reputations in the world. That's where I was going to go. Is everybody with me so far? Okay. And then I started thinking more about this. So I had three children. I was married. I had 3 children. And I knew, because my master's degree for my research, I studied stress. And I knew that doctoral programs, people in doctoral programs, have a higher rate of divorce than the rest of the population. I mean, the rest of the population is about 50%. It's even higher for people in PhD programs. And I had 3 kids. And we were going to be moving away from basically our support structure, you know, our family, our extended family. Example, where I live right now, I have a sister who lives 1 block away. I have a brother who lives 3 blocks away. Now, we are not in each other's business all the time, just to be clear. Oh, by the way, I also have a sister who lives in Argentina. So there's a little bit of a spread, okay? But for the most part, my family support structure is in Northeast Wisconsin. And my youngest son at the time was less than a year old. I spent a summer. The reason I'm sharing this particular example with you is it is actually the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I spent a summer thinking and thinking and thinking about, should I actually go to the University of Michigan? I knew on the one hand that if I went to the University of Michigan and got my PhD there, that I could write my ticket for the rest of my career. I could go wherever I wanted, basically. I would have offers from the best institutions once I finished. When I published things, I would end up being probably, most likely, the odds were that I would be top in my field. Okay. On the other hand, I also was going to be asking a lot of my husband in terms of raising these 3 children, because in order to succeed in such a highly competitive graduate program, one has to spend an extraordinary amount of time every day. You all think you're busy? Trust me, your life can get even busier. So I'm weighing all these things. It took me a couple of months. I had basically a spreadsheet going of pros and cons, and I kept going back and forth and back and forth. While I was thinking about this, the guy who, the faculty member at the University of Michigan that I most wanted to study with, let me know that he was planning to leave the University of Michigan. He was going to be going to North Carolina. And he worked with them so that they made an offer to me to have the same deal I was going to have at Michigan. So he wanted me to come there where he was going to go. So I would have a free ride and everything. Holy crap. But I would be even further away from home. Ultimately, I decided not to go. It was the hardest decision. I decided that it would not be fair to my husband or my children to take them away from family, and that I would just have to figure out something else. So I told the University of Michigan that I couldn't go. That was hard. That was the hardest decision, because I was basically at that point deciding that I was giving up my dream. And I wasn't sure how it would all turn out. And I was disappointed and sad. And it took me a long time, actually, to get over the fact that I'd said no to the University of Michigan. What I ultimately did is, a year later, I decided I still wanted that PhD. I had to figure out how to make that work with my husband and children and keeping them in their support network. And so I decided to go to UW Milwaukee, which also has an excellent program. But instead of being there all the time, I would commute. So I drove back and forth from Green Bay to Milwaukee. I couldn't tell you how many miles I put on my car doing this while I worked full time and raised these children. And I ended up still married, which is quite a miracle. But rest assured, for several years after, I still wondered what it would have been like if I'd just gone to the University of Michigan. So it wasn't, many of you talking about your decision and how you feel about it in the aftermath, you feel pretty good about it. At first, I didn't feel good at all about the decision that I'd made to not go to the University of Michigan. In fact, I wondered about all kinds of decisions that I'd made previously, like getting married and having kids, and whether those were the right thing, and whether I should have decided differently there. Really complex stuff. Now, of course, I'm happy that I made the decision I did, but look at where I'm still living. What? 56 years old and I'm still in Wisconsin? If you ever wondered why Lucy travels as much as she does, you have your answer. If I have to live here, at least I'm going to get on a plane and leave fairly frequently, although not now, right? Not now. But anyway, it worked out in the end. I've had a very successful career. I'm at the kind of school that I absolutely wanted to be at, so this has worked out beautifully. My family is happy to have been raised here. My extended family is happy that we lived here. And in retirement, I'm leaving to go to where it's warmer. So I just have to hang on for a few more years in Wisconsin's winters. Making decisions is tough, I've made a lot of difficult decisions as a manager over the years. I've had to let people go. I've had to tell people that they were being terminated. I've had to make difficult budget decisions. I've had to make programmatic decisions that were hard, that had consequences not only for me, but for others. And this is a key difference that I want to emphasize for you. The decisions that you all talked about, for the most part, the consequences accrued to you. When you become a leader, the consequences accrue to others as well. And you will end up having to make decisions that will affect other people negatively. And there will be no avoiding those decisions. And it will not be because you're a bad person that you've had to make decisions that affect other people negatively. It's because that is the nature of life. Lots of people over the next several months to a year will have to make difficult decisions, right? About where they live, where they work, and the leaders of those organizations, who gets to come back, who doesn't, how the organization changes strategically, and so on. These are all going to be very difficult decisions. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit then about Chapter 11. I have just a few things that I want to emphasize. Today, we're going to end up pretty much going to the end, but then no more after today. So it's okay. I have 3 things, just 3, that I want to talk about. Are you ready? Lecture outline, Chapter 11. The first one, page 2. I want to compare and contrast the rational decision-making model and the boundedly rational decision-making model for you. I'm going to do it very quickly. The rational decision-making model is the one that sounds like the best one because the word rational. Ooh, that sounds good, right? The rational decision-making model is almost always not applicable because it focuses on optimization. And frankly, it's impossible for most of the really big decisions you'll make to optimize them. Whether it's which school to go to, which major to choose, where to live, whether to marry, whether to have children, what kind of job to accept. These are all decisions that you're not going to be optimizing. You actually will be using the boundedly rational model. That's what you did for choosing your college. It's most likely what you'll do when it's time to choose a life partner, if that's something that you want, and whether to have children, etc. The house that you'll buy. These all tend to be boundedly rational decisions. Here's why. Very simply. You did not look at all the colleges and schools. You didn't, because that's over 4,000. Just in the United States alone. Why didn't you? Why didn't you look at all of the colleges and universities? What's the answer? Throw out an idea. Somebody go for it.
Oh. Oh yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Annika. Or Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
All right. I just say because the time it takes to do all that isn't worth the return. Like there are plenty of good schools that you can find sooner.
Okay. So the time, Annika, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I was just saying like time. Just I don't know. I mean, like you don't have a lot of time to go to every single state and like all over, and then going to other countries in the world.
I mean, just think about this. Think about this from a practical standpoint. The idea of, first of all, listing all of the colleges and universities. Like there are over 4,000, as I said, in the United States. There will be fewer by the end of this year, for real. But it will still be in the thousands. To list all of them, to then list all of the criteria, to try to assess all of those criteria, to visit them. It's not only time, it's money. How much time do you want to spend on this decision? And what are the odds that if you optimized it, it would in fact turn out to be better than if you didn't bother optimizing? So boundedly rational is what you actually did. How many, in the chat, how many different schools did you consider? Put your number in the chat, each of you. How many different schools did you? I want to see everybody. How many different schools? Okay, the biggest number I saw was 10. That's a little bit less than 4,000, right? And I saw most of you were well under 10. I saw at least one person who just said 1, right? Okay. Now, when we talk about optimizing decisions, again, that's what the rational decision-making model is useful for. It's useful for optimizing. It says we're looking at all of the alternatives. We're going to assess all of the alternatives so that we can find the best, the one best choice of all the choices. Why would you go with a small number when deciding your college, which I heard from so many of you, we all did, it's a big decision, difficult decision. Why only look at the number you did? Let's hear it. Why only that number? Why was that enough?
Well, I personally was just looking at schools in like Wisconsin and Minnesota just because I didn't want to be super far away from home.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I mean, like I was looking at them like schools that I knew had a good reputation too. So like if I hadn't really like heard about them, I don't really look at them all that much.
Okay. Fair. Did you hear what just happened there? Annika put boundaries around the decision. That's what we mean by boundedly rational. We put boundaries. First of all, I don't want to go that far away from home. So I'm only going to be looking at Wisconsin and Minnesota. Second, I'm only going to be considering schools that I've heard of previously. So that's another limitation, another boundary placed around the possibilities. Is everybody with me? Somebody else, tell me why the number that you picked. Why only that number?
I'll go really quick.
Okay.
I think a big thing is, like so many factors like play into basically minimizing the number of colleges that you're looking for. One is I'm a business guy, so one is like looking for a great business school.
Okay.
Another is in state, less money that way. Distance from home. My brother went to Norbs as well. So many different things like play into the fact that you're not really looking at more than, like a few, for me at least. Another huge thing is like being like a people person, building relationships and knowing people through a small community is vital for me. So I completely basically, I knew just how I am that I would not go to like a Madison type situation,
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, more boundaries, right? Everybody heard this? Okay. I don't need to optimize the decision. I know that there are certain things that will place boundaries around those alternatives. So I only need to look at so many. Makes total sense. Now, here's what's important. The reason I wanted to highlight this again. You've got the rational model, which sounds like it's a great idea, and it does work for some things. It does. For example, when there aren't a lot of alternatives, period. Or if you're letting a computer do the optimization, like with logistics problems. Okay? But boundedly rational, where you are bounding or placing boundaries around your decision before you even start to consider actual alternatives, this is actually a really good model because it allows you to be efficient, right? For the amount of time that you're going to put into thinking about your decision versus what's likely to come out of the decision. Think about how many of you said, yeah, you're happy with the decision that you made. You're happy with the decision you made. Okay. So even though you didn't use the rational model, it worked out. Another example, when it's time to pick your life partner, if that's important to you, are you actually going to consider billions of possibilities? I mean, that's how many there are. No way. No way. One of my favorite things to hear is when people say they found their soulmate within it, like in their same town. Well, of course you did, because that's where you live. I mean, duh. Even in a time of online, we're still most likely to look for people who live within relative proximity of us. We also make decisions about people are if they live fairly close to where I live, they have some things in common with me. Hence, you're going to end up with your soulmate living, magically, probably within your same town. It's quite fantastic. If you tried to use a rational decision-making approach to that decision, you would spend your entire life and probably never find somebody better than the person you could have found using the bounded rational. Same with buying a house. You're not going to look at all the houses. You're only going to look at houses in a certain community, in a certain price range, etc. So you will have bounded. This makes sense? Yes? Awesome. Second thing I want to talk about, remember I only have 3. On page 4, I want to talk a little bit about faulty decision making. And the reason I want to talk about this is because well, first of all, it's important that you recognize some of the oopses that we can make when we're making decisions, but also because it's terribly relevant right now. The world in which we're living. Pandemic world. How many of you yesterday, maybe the day before, on social media caught this video of the person talking about this pandemic and how it's basically not such a real thing? Her name is Judy Mikovits. How many of you saw such a thing? Saw hints of it? You will, if you haven't already. One of the things that I've been noticing on social media is how stupid people are getting. It's quite impressive. I just said that in the judgiest way possible. And here's what I mean. People are letting decision-making biases influence their thinking, as opposed to thinking critically and making careful decisions. For example, one of the biases that's not listed here is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias happens when we seek out information that confirms what we already think, and we place higher value on that information. So people who believe that a safer at home order is an infringement upon their rights will look for information that agrees with that perspective. Are you with me? That's confirmation bias. Also, confirmation bias, similar to availability bias, all of a sudden, that's the stuff that you're seeing more and more of. I'm seeing a fascinating thing where the anti-vaccination folks are now overlapping with the "you're infringing on my rights" folks, overlapping with the "you're destroying the economy" folks. It's quite fascinating to observe, again, as a person who's an expert in decision making, and kind of linking these things together, that somehow the government is planning to force upon us vaccinations for a virus that they have created. I'm going to give you a hint about how to think about the world that should help you screen things. You should always ask yourself, first of all, how credible is the source of this information? This video that I'm talking about that I mentioned, it's associated with a movie called Plandemic that's coming out. You'll see it. Go looking for it. You'll see it. It's been talking about on Twitter and Facebook. One of the taglines for this is that this woman is a renowned scientist. First thing you want to do, assess the source. So if a person is actually a renowned scientist, they will have published significantly in terms of numbers and quality. Go look her up. See what she's published. See what other people think about whatever she's published. I'm gonna cut to the chase on this one. She's not a renowned scientist. She is someone whose reputation, in fact, is for a person who made stuff up. And her so-called most famous piece of work was in fact retracted from a journal because it was found to not be replicable. And one of the key things with science is that when we publish and we say that we found something, somebody else needs to be able to find the same thing. If they can't, then odds are you made something up along the way. You fudged the data somehow. This woman is not a person to be trusted. So 1, consider the source. 2, ask yourself, who's going to make money off this? Because we live in a world dominated by capitalism. Somebody wants you to go spend money to watch a movie at some point. Somebody wants you to agitate. Again, they're going to make money off this. So be careful. Confirmation bias. This is why it's important to look at different sources of information, ideally sources that aren't necessarily in agreement with each other, so that you don't find yourself reaching a conclusion based on data that is in fact just the same thing over and over and over again. Is everybody tracking with me so far? Okay. The other important bias that I want to bring to your attention, it's actually a logical fallacy, and it's called false equivalence. And it's very important. The layman's way of thinking about this is comparing apples and oranges. So we say that two things are the same, but they actually are not the same. They're not the same. There's a lot in current events, a lot in the media right now, where people are saying things as if what they were talking about was the same, when in fact it is not. Being asked to wear a mask when you go into a retail setting, or being required to wear a mask, is not the same as being denied your First Amendment rights. They are not the same. That is false equivalence. Being told to wear a mask when you go into a retail setting is the same as being told you have to have shoes on. Period. That's all it is. You're not being denied any rights. You don't need to shop there. Being able to shop at a given place is not a right. It's not. You have to wear a shirt when you go into these establishments. Right now, a lot of these places are telling you to wear a mask. That is not a violation of anyone's First Amendment rights. Are you with me? There are actual violations of First Amendment rights that need attention. Being asked to wear a mask is not one of those things. Okay? So be on the lookout for false equivalence and confirmation bias. Third thing I want to talk about is groupthink. This is on page 6. Why it's so important to avoid groupthink. And this is also current, where we listen to people who all seem to say the same thing, and we think, well, that must be the way it is. I'm asking you to be critical thinkers, to be actual leaders, to play the devil's advocate, to ask the question, why? Why do we think this is true? Do we know with certainty? What is our evidence? These are all ways to overcome groupthink. There are also ways to help us think better. The world needs you to be an effective leader. That requires that you communicate well, that you understand the importance of teamwork. Fundamentally, though, it requires that you think well. And that requires you to be skeptical and to ask questions. Okay. You need to have listened to the narrated PowerPoints. This is what I want to, the next thing on the agenda is talking about exam 2 and the upcoming exam 3. So all your grades are out there for exam 2. And I'm going to now give you the hint for how to ensure that you do well on exam 3. Are you ready? It's actually really simple. Where I noted issues with exam 2 and also exam 1 is when people, there are two possible issues. And only two. Only two. Number one, not fully answering the question. So I got to take points off. I have each of the questions. They're set up for 5 points each. I try to set them up so that it's easy for you to see. Like there are 5 things I want you to talk about. For example, with this last exam, I wanted you to use 5 different motivation theories and give someone who's going to be a leader a piece of advice using each one of those theories. And you could pick the 5 from the list, okay? And it should be pretty straightforward. With that question, you do 5 things, you get them right. That's the second piece I'm going to talk about. You do 5 things, you get 5 points. That's seriously. But if you only told me about 4, well, then I have to take a point off. Is everybody with me? So double check as you do this next exam that you have actually answered the entire question. Make sure you've done that. So that was the number one thing where I had to go, oh, darn it, you were on a roll. And then you stopped short. You didn't do the one last thing. It's like, ah. Okay, so that's one. So make sure you answer the whole question. Number 2, you have to get it right. What's the best way to ensure that you're getting things right? You have to listen to the narrated PowerPoint and take notes. You have to do it. It's just like being in class. You read the lecture outline, you look at the PowerPoint printout, that doesn't have everything that I talk about. Example, there were some people who used theory X and theory Y to answer one of the questions and got it wrong. I very explicitly in the narrated PowerPoint talk about how theory X and theory Y is not how people actually are. Theory X and theory Y are about the assumptions that a manager makes about people. And then I had some folks try to use theory X and theory Y and say something like, recognize that some of your people are more theory X. They might be lazy, and other people are more theory Y, where they're not lazy. And you need to adjust your, no, that's not theory X. That's not the theory. That's wrong. So wrong. Is everybody with me? But if you just read something, you could make that mistake. So please, please, I did my best to try and make those interesting, and they're not too long. For chapters 9 and 11, they're relative shortish, shorter than if we were in class. Okay? Make sure you listen and take notes. It's very important. So that's the 2 things. You either didn't fully answer the question, or you flat out didn't get something right. And almost always, it was something that I did say in the narrated PowerPoint, or I did clarify. So you could do yourself a favor, and you can. I am not taking off points for poor grammar or typos. Okay? I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I am most interested in, do you fully answer the question, and are you getting the pieces right? Okay? Questions about the exam? The one, are we able to review our past exams? Yes. All you have to do is talk to me. I can't just make it so that you can see them, because I use questions from one semester to the next. That helps me to calibrate and know that I'm continuing to ask things fairly. So if you want to see how you did, you want me to talk through with you, just let me know, and we can really quickly, I can pull it up in Moodle. You can do this in a Google Hangout. If you missed like 1 point or something like that, I could maybe even take a look at and just let you know in an email what you did. Let me know if you want to see more of this. Okay? So it's a great question. Thank you. Happy to do that with you. Happy to take the time. And it wouldn't take us very long to review very quickly your stuff if that's what you want. Any other questions? So exam 3, same format, 5 questions, each worth 5 points. Again, very carefully make sure. I will send you the 5 questions in a Word doc so that you can work on them outside of being in Moodle, so you don't have to be on the internet, right? And then you can just copy and paste into Moodle. The exam will open up later today, and it's open until the due date, which is next Tuesday at 11:59. And as you are reviewing, prepping, studying for the exam, if there's anything that's not clear, anything at all, just reach out to me. I will very happily help to make things clearer. Absolutely. I want you to do well. I want you to do well on these. That's important to me. Leadership paper. Are there more questions than the one that I answered at the very beginning of class? Anything not clear? Go for it, Joe.
Yeah, so in the syllabus under concluding thoughts, it talks about that we have to talk about 2 to 3 takeaways, and then it also says 2 to 3 lessons that we will use to become a better leader. Are those the same thing, or are they different?
Yep,
Okay.
those are the same thing. Let me emphasize something. Yeah, can I emphasize something real quick, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is super important, folks. You want to get all the points for the concluding section. Besides saying what those 2 to 3 takeaways are, I want you to be really specific about how you're going to make those lessons part of your life. Really specific, like a plan. Are you with me? Lay it out like a SMART goal, specific, measurable, etc. Okay? So don't just say, I'll never forget this, or this is a really important thing. Tell me exactly what you're going to do. You do that, you'll get those points. Okay? Joe, I interrupted you, so please.
Yeah. I have one more question.
Yeah, of course.
So when we're like referring to the content from the class per like paragraph, I guess, should we be doing that for every point that we make, or once per, or like, is there like a number you're looking for, I guess?
Not a number so much as what you want to demonstrate to me is that you are making the connection between what this person has talked about and your experience with them, et cetera, and the class stuff. And it should be pretty easy to do since each of the questions relates back to a class thing, right? And it could be, I mean, I don't want you to like think in terms of, oh, every other sentence I have to say something that relates to class. But if you imagine a page, I would expect to see at least 2 to 3 things from class on every page. Does that make sense, folks?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as you write this paper, a stylistic thing, first of all, is to make sure that every single page has 2 or 3 paragraphs on it, not just one long paragraph, because your reader will hate your guts. Okay, it's impossible to read. Break it up, okay? And so if you imagined, like if you had two paragraphs and then you had a connection, 2 ideas from class, that would be perfect, right? That would be you showing me, oh, I'm seeing how this stuff fits together. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Other questions? How many of you are all done with this thing? It's done. Some of you are still working on it. It's not due till later, so that's okay. It's what I expect. It's fine. I don't finish stuff early. God bless those of you who do. I mean, I want you on my team. But I'm one of those people who's like, is it midnight yet? No. I still got time. Other questions? Anything else with this leadership paper? Has it been good interviewing this person? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed it. One of the more enjoyable assignments, probably the most out of this semester's classes.
Fun to talk to somebody that you respect, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, learn some more about what makes them tick. Cool. Yeah. I'm glad. Like I said, these usually grade well because you're engaged with the topic. So I'm looking forward to reading those. You all should have a pretty good sense of where you stand in the class right now. I looked overall at the grades, and you know, it's looking pretty darn good in my opinion. You may want more or less or whatever, but if there's any confusion on your part as to where you're at right now, just let me know. Okay? Don't hesitate. All right, last thing then. You should have gotten a note from the folks who always send out the reminder about doing the soot. Yes? Yes? Okay. I can see how many people have done it so far. And when I look I can't see the actual responses yet. I won't see those until June. But I can see how many. And right now, 8 of you have done it. If everybody does it, I will throw some extra credit points into the mix. Not like 50. I mean, the tests are only worth 25, for heaven's sakes. But I would say up to 5. I have to decide, but up to 5, let's say. But everybody's got to do it. It's super important because it's not the usual soot. It requires you to write some things. But we really want to learn what has worked and what maybe has been more challenging for you. I know that this is a really challenging way to try and learn. And I appreciate that you've hung in there, especially given the size of our class. It's not, if this was a much smaller class, we could be more interactive, but it's really difficult with this size class and an intro level class besides. But I want to hear from you. What worked? What helped you to learn in this environment? Not only what I did, but also what you did. I'm really interested in particular in sort of the strategies that you came up with to help you learn in this really challenging environment, right? That will be the last that you will have to hear from me. Of course, as I said, I'm happy to chat with any of you at any point. I want you to know that I think we might have a couple people graduating, but everybody else should be back on campus in the fall. When we are, my office is in the 3rd floor of Coffrin. I will have candy. I will have chocolate. I would love to see you. To walk in, roll in, and say, hey, I know you only saw me online, Lucy, but here I am in real life. That would be fantastic. It is my hope that each of you will remain safe and healthy and sane, and that the same will be true for your loved ones, and that we will all find ourselves resuming a more normal life in the very near future. It's been a pleasure getting to know you at least as well as I've been able to do that in this setting. So take care all, and have a great rest of your day, etc. Reach out to me if you need me, okay? Hugs, virtual hugs. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Absolutely, Sam. Bye, Tiana. Goodbye, Evan. What's up, Sam?
Oh, it's just us, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep, there's just us at this point.
Oh,
Oh, actually, let me stop the recording first. Otherwise, that'll end up being part of the...
Or you could record us and they could watch us.
Well, that actually happened with a conversation
Really?
I had